Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know, my name is Justin CALOMESE, and I am going to talk to you today about why the other three officers in the George Floyd case should also be arrested with ex-officer Chavez. Quick background on me. I have a Associate of Arts degree from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. I have a BS in Biology from the University of Arkansas in Monticello. I also have a Bachelor's in Science of Nursing from the University of Arkansas in Monticello. I was in the middle of getting my family nurse practitioner from the Northwestern State University in Louisiana. I got accepted into med school at the American University of Antigua. This came up because I just watched the full clip of the George Floyd video from one of the bystanders, the 10-minute clip. I'd seen bits and pieces from the news and social media, but this was the first time that I've seen the entire clip from start to finish. And it was pretty gruesome. So in the video, George Floyd was already arrested. First off, the cops were called because you try to pay for something at the store with a bad $20 bill, whether he knew about it or didn't know about it, because nobody ever looks at their money when they get it, like hold it up to the light and is this a real 20? Nobody ever does that. So whether he knew or didn't know is irrelevant. I seen on one of the building security cams where they had initially put him in handcuffs and sat him down. And then there was another clip on CNN. It was like after they picked him up, it looked like they had fell and he was on top of them. Then different body cam footage where they was beating him in the back of the car, and then they pulled him out of the car, and that's how he ended back up on the ground. And that's where the bystander video starts. But it's a little bit of time frame in between then, because where she started is where he was begging for his life. After everything was done, he was detained, handcuffs were on, and he wasn't moving. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't resisting. And the officer was on his neck, had his knee in the back of his neck. And there is another officer supervising the scene. That's Officer Tao. And then the other two officers that were on his legs. Now, Chauvin has been arrested and charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. I believe it should be second-degree murder with intent to kill. And, first degree is, premeditated murder. So now whether George Floyd and Officer Chauvin had run-ins before, and Chauvin had decided, I want that guy to die, that would be first-degree murder. Now, when the intent to kill comes in, when he loses consciousness and he still remains on his neck for like another 3 minutes and had the smirk on his face, then there is where it's like it didn't matter to him whether that guy lived or died. And that's where I believe intent to kill should be implemented on him. So now, why should the other three officers be arrested? I think the other three, Officer Tao should have third-degree murder and manslaughter. Maybe even second, because when you look at his demeanor as the video goes on, his aggression towards the crowd and him arguing, and then him saying things like, this is what drugs do to you, don't do drugs. And like all of that was irrelevant. So they're using their previous encounters with other people who use drugs. I don't want to say drug addicts because, I don't know if everybody he's encountered was a drug addict who are on drugs. He's using his previous experiences to conduct himself in that environment at that point, and that's yet he did it incorrectly. So he had already judged George Floyd and had no remorse, no empathy, nothing. He just to Officer Tao, he's seen it as, not saying that George Floyd is a user or an addict to cocaine, but Officer Tao's demeanor, to him, George Floyd was just another crackhead. So it was just, yeah, whatever. There's no need for me to treat him with any human dignity or respect. Now, when I was in nursing school, I worked at a behavioral psych unit in Arkansas, Monticello, called Centers for Youth and Families. So it was a behavioral psych and placement unit. So we would get kids, who had nowhere to go with DHS. So those were the placement kids. We had kids who, couldn't act right in school and in alternative school. And it was like, our unit was like the last step before sending a kid to juvie. Those were our behavioral kids. And then we actually had, children who had psych issues. So, real ADD, Asperger's, or some kids had schizoaffective disorder. And this is where, they actually believe the lies that they tell. Like whatever they fabricate in their mind, they believe it to the bone. That was reality. So, and I was a mental health tech. So, I was on ground zero with my kids. And we had kids that are from the ages of 5 to 17. So we had them all. So they trained us in ESI and CPI. These are two takedown and restraining techniques. So if a child was belligerent or violent, when I say belligerent, I mean these techniques were only used when the kid became a threat to himself, themselves, or others. That's the only time you can ever put your hands on a kid, right? Not because the kid is loud or challenging you or not doing what you want them to do. You're not allowed to put your hands on the kids because of any of that. It's when they become violent or it looks like they're about to attack another kid. And even then, like if they're about to attack another kid, only thing we did was step in between them or remove them from the situation. Or if we couldn't remove them, we would remove the group from them. There were so many things that we did that prevented us from actually having to put our hands on the kids. That was absolute last resort. Okay? So and we referred, so when we actually had to, use a physical intervention, we call those a takedown. So we would have to, restrain the kid with our arms and then safely get them to the ground and roll them on their stomach. And sometimes you would hear the kids say, "I can't breathe." And they taught us the proper way, when you're on the child's back, there's a proper way that you're on the back that you're not restraining their breath. And even as the kid says that I can't breathe, we're taught to roll a certain way to give the chest even more room to rise and fall. But that's not the point. The point I want to make is, let's say that I have a 17-year-old kid, 6'4", 220 pounds. Now, that child is a real life, safety threat in case they get upset. That's a university linebacker that I have to go to work and manage every day. So let's say that kid gets an attitude, remove all the other students out, and he still gets irate, and he begins to get, bang on the glass to where the glass is about to break. Now, he could shatter the glass and cut himself, or he, tries to attack me, which is, unlikely. But if he's a threat to himself or a threat to others, or if he attacks one of the other kids, then I'm able to use, at that company we used ESI technique. So I would restrain a kid and get him to the ground. And if he was still, irate and belligerent on the ground and struggling, then someone would come and hold the legs. If he's super strong, then there's 2 people on his legs. But in the midst of all of this, before it gets bad, we are to notify the nurse on shift, because the nurse is head of shift. So I'm gonna set the scene of how, for this example, the kid is, huge, and I would be on his back doing the proper ESI hold, making sure he still had room to breathe, but restraining him to where his arms couldn't be free. There would be 2 people on his legs, 1 on each leg, and then the nurse would be standing over us, making sure that we're doing all the techniques properly. So this relates to the George Floyd video, because in my example, I would be the officer that was on his neck, except I wouldn't have been on his neck. I would have, restrained him a safe way to where he was able to breathe. And my other 2 workers on my kid's legs would have been those officers that were on his legs. And then the nurse who watches over my situation would be Officer Tao in that situation. Now, let's say in my example where I have the 17-year-old restrained, let's say in my example, he dies, because of, the I can't breathe, and, I did it wrong, or it was very clear that I didn't care if he couldn't breathe, and everything leads to the child's death. In my situation, automatically, without question, everybody who had their hands on the child, which would be me on his back, the other 2 on his legs, we would have lost our jobs. Now, the nurse would have lost her job as well, their job as well. I say, there because I'm a nurse as well. So the nurse would have lost their job. Everybody that had anything to do with it would have lost their job. And immediately, all 4 of us would have had charges pressed on us, because all 4 of us are responsible for that life. Does that make sense? So we're seeing where the officer on his neck is the only one that's charged. That's why I'm so confused as to what are they waiting on for the other officers in the video. All 4 of them were responsible for what was going on. The other 2 that was holding his legs, they knew what was going on. They knew that he wasn't struggling, and they still were on his legs. He did Officer Tao. He was responsible, making sure the scene was safe. Nobody approached them. But he's still also responsible for his other co-workers who are involved in the restraint. Another point I want to make is that in my example, the nurse that would be supervising the restraint technique would not only lose her job, and then be brought up on charges, but they also would be reported to the Board of Nursing. And most likely, she would probably lose her license. Now, I say that because in the officer's video, their demeanor was with intent to kill. In my example, if we would have done the same thing, it would have looked like we restrained the child with intent to kill. We'd all have been fired. We'd have all been brought up on charges. The nurse would have lost their license. Now, I want to harp on the nurse losing their license, because if the nurse would have done something like racially profiled somebody and been involved in a improper restraining of a patient or a client, they would lose their license. Because of the nurse's actions, they are no longer allowed to go to another facility or another hospital and practice, because now they are a potential threat to the public. I don't understand why everybody thinks, well, the officers got fired. Well, we hear about the officers getting fired all the time, and then 2 days later, they have a job at the sheriff's office. That shouldn't be. They should take their badges and their ability to practice law enforcement, period. I feel that all the officers in the video are responsible. They all should, lost their jobs. I think they all should lose their badges so they are unable to practice law enforcement anywhere else ever. And I do think they all should be brought on criminal charges. I had a talk with my pops yesterday, and said that he made a lot of interesting points. We both agree that, people are afraid to rob a store. Like, I don't want to go in Walmart and just take a pack of diapers and walk out, because the police can, show up and, essentially shoot me and kill me. That could be a consequence of me going in and taking toothpaste out of the Dollar Tree. I could be shot by the police. But the police have no fear of their actions. They have an administrative body over them, but there is no governing force above them. There's a police force above us, but there's no force, to police the police. There's no fear of physical reprimand for the police. Does that make sense? If I steal out of a store, the police are going to come and physically put their hands on me. Yeah, I'll go to jail and I'll get, charges and stuff. That's the administrative, body that the court system will punish me. But initially, the police will show up, and them physically putting their hands on me, that is punishment. Because they show up and they beat people. To justify their actions, they scream out, "Stop resisting," when it's 10 of them on top of you. So it gives them the legal right to beat the snot out of you. And then they all stand on you until you can't breathe and you might die by positional asphyxiation. That's the thing. So, but there's no force that governs the police force. There used to be. It was called the Black Panther Party. And they would follow policemen on their patrol. And when they made their stops, they would stand across the street, and they would make sure that the police treated, the civilians with care and dignity. And if they didn't, that's where a lot of riots came from, because the Black Panthers, they exercised their right to bear arms, and they let officers know when they was on scene, either you handle this right or I'm ready to die in defending my fellow civilians. But that's not the only thing Black Panther did. They, started the WIC program and after school care, and they did they were 99% positive, and that 1% of them, they just wasn't, they wasn't going to be pushed over. I'm not going to say that they were violent or any of that, because that's what they use to label them as terrorists. And they hunted the Black Panther known members down, and they, essentially executed them. The government did that, and that's how the Black Panthers dispersed. Not saying we need to bring the Black Panther Party back to police the police, but we need the Black Panther Party back to police the police. Okay, another major point I want to point out is we're still waiting on these 3 officers, to be arrested. It's been days. And we saw in the Aubrey case that it took 70 days for there to be an arrest of the McMichaels. That is insane. Me being a black man, I could be driving, getting pulled over, and the officer asks for my license, and then I ask him, well, what are you pulling me over for? And he'll say, give me your license first, and then I'll tell you, which is incorrect. You have to tell me what you're pulling me over for before I give you my license. That's policy. He has to. But because you stood up to him, everything could go left, and they'll call it disorderly conduct, and they'll drag you out of the car, and you're immediately arrested. Now, me as a black man, I could be immediately arrested for disagreeing with a cop or not following a lawful order. Just means whatever they say is a lawful order, which is not true. Either do what I say or go to jail as a black man. However, as a white man in this country, you can hop in your trucks, chase down a black man that is out for a jog, pull up on him with pistols and shotguns, shoot him 3 times in broad daylight, and you don't have to worry about going to jail immediately. You don't have to. Think I'm lying? The McMichaels, it was 70 days before they made an arrest, which is crazy because everybody is upset about the protests and then burning everything down. It's like, okay. And I'm straddled, I'm on the fence about it. No, I don't think they should be burning down Targets and things, and definitely not black-owned businesses. We shouldn't be burning down our own neighborhoods. I don't think we should be burning down anything because, you burn down a Target, that's like 5,000 people who can't go get their medicine. However, nobody listened to us when Brother Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem. Everybody kept talking about he's disrespecting the flag and he's disrespecting our military. Why? This is not the time and the place to protest. Okay. And he was protesting police brutality because back then we was talking about Trayvon Martin, Castillo, the brother in Baton Rouge, the riots in Ferguson. We were talking about all that. And Cap was like, why would I stand for a flag that doesn't stand for people who look like me? Which is true. Because I could be going for a jog and white men can chase me down in a truck, execute me in broad daylight, and not be arrested for weeks. They could have left the country and been gone, and no justice would have been served. Nobody wanted to hear us when the NFL players were silently protesting, taking a knee, fining people. They blackballed Kaepernick's name. But now everybody has an attitude because instead of silently, peacefully protesting, now there are riots. If y'all would have done something about Zimmerman way back then and changed policy with all that, we wouldn't even be here. If Zimmerman's still walking around this thing free and he executed a teenager because the teenager wouldn't stop and talk to him. For some reason, people think, like if I'm running through a neighborhood, you can come out and ask me, who are you? Where are you coming from? What are you doing here? I don't have to answer to you. I'm not a threat to you. These are public streets. I can run on them. Now, as far as Brother Aubrey going into the construction site, there was no do not trespass signs. So there was no criminal trespassing. I've done it several times. I know people, when you're house hunting, you ride by, you see people that have homes being built, we stop. And like, we'll ask construction workers, yo, can we walk through? And if nobody's there, we just walk through and see what's going on, get ideas. And people like that. People like if I'm building a house and other people are stopping to admire and walk through, and they come back and see the progress. How do you know that? Well, my parents have built 2 homes in my lifetime, and we've seen it happen. We've pulled up to the construction site and there were people there. Hey, how are y'all? Hey, we was just walking through. Hey, oh, okay. And my mom would give them a tour. No big deal. We didn't chase anybody down with shotguns and pistols and gun them down in the street. This is probably the largest point of all. 4 officers are involved in killing a human, and only 1 guy has been arrested. However, the public and everybody crucified probably the top athlete of our generation behind Michael Jordan. His name was Michael Vick. Absolutely crucified him and all of his friends for killing dogs. 8 dogs. It was 8 dogs that they had drowned for either losing or not being aggressive enough in dog fights. Which I didn't even know that dog fighting was illegal at that time. Because I'm from South Mississippi, bro. Like here in the South, like dog fighting was a thing. I never knew it was illegal. But never heard of anybody being arrested for the cockfights. And the upper heads in dog fighting are not black men. Never heard of any of them getting in trouble. But absolutely crucified Michael Vick and all of his friends. Went to jail for dogs dying. But we can't send humans to jail for killing other humans. That's my point. You can say what you want about the dogs dying, but they're not humans. Yes, what was happening was tragic. No, I don't agree with them drowning the dogs, but they're dogs. I'm a dog lover. I own a pit. American Blue Nose is my baby. No, I wouldn't drown them. But I also wouldn't, stand on somebody's neck until they die for 10 minutes. Human. I don't understand how Michael Vick can lose everything because of dogs, and these officers are getting, they lost their job. They can go get another one at a different precinct. They can move to another state and still practice law enforcement and potentially kill somebody else. There's no way you could twist this. There's no way you could flip this around. All the officers involved need to be indicted. There are protests all over the world because that video was clear. And there was so much other speculation around the Mike Brown case and the case Sterling in Baton Rouge, even though Mike Brown was unarmed. And then they talked about, well, he was high. Like, I've been high before. Y'all make it seem like people who smoke weed become the Hulk. That's not true. And that's not true. The Sterling case in Baton Rouge, the 2 officers had him on his back. They reached in. They said he had a gun, and he did. It was in his pocket, and we seen the police shoot him twice and then pull his gun out of his pocket. So Sterling was not in threat of shooting them. Trayvon Martin, on the way home from the gas station, went to get a pack of Skittles. Y'all didn't hear us when we was kneeling for the national anthem. Now everybody's upset about the riots. The execution of the black man must stop. So I went and talked to the police 2 days ago. I went and met with some police officers in my area because I wanted to get ahead of it and give them a message of peace and love, because I didn't want, I have children and brothers and sisters here, like my baby brother and baby sister. They go to school here. My daughter goes to school here. And it's like, so I don't want, the riots to happen here, or the police to be so on edge that they end up accidentally shooting or purposely shooting any of my family members. That is a real life threat for me, because, I'm 6 foot, 280 pounds, and, I have a beard. I wear hoodies when I run, and, I could be perceived as a threat. And my baby brother is almost 6'5", 240 pounds. He plays football for Mississippi Gulf Coast, and, he would be seen as a threat to an officer. So when we went to talk to the police, Jordan, my baby brother, towered over them. And he didn't speak much when we were talking to him. But, I'm very confrontational. I don't mind speaking to people. I'm very fearless when it comes to speech and speaking. So I did most of the talking. And it was positive. The talk was positive. He invited me to come back and meet with the police chief. So I'm going to meet with the police chief in Bay St. Louis, and the chief at Waveland Police, and the sheriff over Hancock County. But afterwards, me and my brother went and worked out, and I asked him, so what did you think about our talk with the police? And since middle school, I've always, raised my baby brother and be like, no fear. There's, the only thing you fear is God. Never fear anything or another man. There's, nobody can do anything to you but God. That's the only person that you should ever fear. So when I asked him, he said, man, I was scared. And I kind of looked at him, like, scared of what? I thought he was talking maybe just talking to him, because we didn't have a prepared speech. I thought that maybe the communication part is what had him nervous. I was like, scared of what? And he said, man, I thought they was gonna shoot me in my head or shoot me in my chest. And it almost brought me to tears, because my brother is a solid guy. My baby brother, he's tall, he's solid, he's big, and it's to hear it in his voice, for him to say how afraid he was of his life, just standing there and having a conversation with police officers. That is insane. For them to have that much power to instill that much fear. That's not law enforcement. That's not what law enforcement should be. It's there was 3 of them, and 2 of them, they seemed very open and well spoken, but there was one, standing in the back, he was just quiet, but I could tell he was real green. He was new. I could tell, he just, stood like he was Batman with his utility belt and his bulletproof vest, and it was just he was real proud of himself for having all of that on. And hearing him speak, it dawned on me, and I was like, did this guy even finish high school? Or, because that's scary, because I'm standing here within a large, I don't want to sound, I'm standing here with a lot of education under my belt, and my baby brother is just big, and he could potentially see both of us as a threat, because in a police stop, I would talk around him, because it's very obvious that I knew more than he did. I don't want to talk down on anybody. It was very obvious. So he would think that he has a right to do this, that, and the third. And I would explain to him that's not true. And just me pissing him off, like this guy in front of me who has, little to maybe, no education. And I say education, talking about post-high school. And he has a 40 on his hip that's probably loaded. He probably has 2 extra clips, taser, billy club, pepper spray. He has all of these weapons on his belt that he can use at his discretion. And that's scary because police training is 6 months? It's like, so first off, they're law enforcement and they don't have degrees in law. So you're enforcing laws that you don't know. They don't have a degree in psych or sociology. So they don't understand the individual, much less the population. It's just so... I feel that there should be... I think there should be higher standards for police officers. There should be either degree requirements or extensive training. Like if you join the police force, you do not hit the beat for another 3 to 4 years because you're in psych training, sociology training, ESI training, CPI training, de-escalation training. Like I think these police officers it'd be mandatory for them to work on dual psych units. So their only encounter with drug users won't be with them on the street. Because you encounter drug and mental patients on the street, they're either manic, or they're on a binge. So that's where they walk in the house and like they've, killed a baby, and that's your only experience you have with a crackhead. I'm not gonna say crackhead, with a user of cocaine. Let's say that. Versus that seeing that same person on do a psych unit where the medicine is being regulated, and you see that this is something that they're struggling with, and they only are allowed to, on an acute unit, to discharge me with 2 months worth of medicine, but I can't get a doctor's appointment for a psychiatrist for 3 months. So I'm a month off my meds before I can get to a doctor. And by that time, my medicine has wore off and the cycle starts all over again. Like, I believe the police should have other experiences other than the negative ones they encounter while on the force. But there are officers who are, educated, they have criminal justice, with a minor in psychology and, this, that, and the third. But I just think there needs to be, I don't think a kid should be, 17. I just graduated and I did 6 months in the academy. Now I'm 18. Give me a gun, a badge, shotgun, assault rifle, pepper spray, handcuffs, a police cruiser, a paycheck, and like now I have the ability in my own discretion. Okay. And then law enforcement is going to come and say, no, we put, we put them with a partner. But, that's not always the case, bro. That is not always the case. I think on this next presidential candidacy, the number one issue is not going to be healthcare reform or deficit reform or economy reform. The top 3 things that should be on the next presidential, governor, mayoral candidacy should be police reform, jail reform, police reform. all these cops that are on the street now, they don't have, you know, a whole bunch of education. You take their badge and send them to training or send them to school. All of this is happening because of prejudice and lack of education. Another point, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to clip it into this. Another point I want to make that my pops pointed out, you know, they hunted down the Black Panther Party. But I had no clue that the Ku Klux Klan was alive and thriving. I had no clue. So like growing up, I always, you know, growing up, you hear about the Ku Klux Klan, it taught us in history. So I thought that the KKK was something of the 60s and 70s and 50s. You know, I thought that was in the past. I thought, you know, they had all, you know, died out. I didn't know it was a thing until I was in Arkansas. I was at Sonic, and I seen the card on the thing that you order in Sonic, the kiosk. There was a card stuck in. It was like you haven't been visited by your local Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and I was confused. I took a picture of it and posted it on my Instagram, and I was confused. I was like, "Is this real?" I was like, "Is that a thing?" I had posted it, and like one of my old football coaches was like, you know, it's not the real KKK. It's just a bunch of guys, you know, get together and, you know, they're drinking buddies, and he's just, you know, talking a lot of noise. I was like, okay. My coach was white, and that's important because I was just, in my mind, I was just like, yo, like you can blow it off because you're a white man, and it's not that big a threat to you. But me being a black man, hearing that the most notorious domestic terrorist organization is still around. And then a couple years later, they started having the KKK rallies in the city, Monticello, Arkansas. Right? And they would have like the FBI come out and block out the street and make sure that nobody would go down to harm them. And then, so that's how, you know, so I knew that the KKK was still a thing, but then they had they started tearing down the statues of the Confederate generals and stuff. Like, I don't even understand why those monuments are still up. These generals were for slavery. Why? I don't understand why they're monuments to people who lost the war. They lost. They shouldn't be praised and looked at as great men. What's the name of the greatest army that Alexander the Great defeated? You don't know. I know it. What's the name of the army, the greatest army that Napoleon defeated? You don't know. I know it. Like nobody cares about the loser of wars. I don't understand why people who were for slavery, why are they still being honored in our country with statues? So when they had the rally and riot in Charleston, I was baffled at the thousands of people who showed up in the KKK shirts. I just couldn't believe the men and women. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, these people the KKK is a known terrorist organization, and they're not out here with masks. They don't care if you know who they are. And now those KKK supporters are gonna go back, and they're gonna go back to their school classrooms, their political positions. They're probably like work at the grocery stores. They work at some car dealers, teachers at the high school. Like some of them might have even been lawyers or judges or police officers. It's like, who are these KKK members? Why are they still allowed to function in normal society? And we know their views. They tried to label Black Lives Matter as a terrorist organization just because we protested the murder and execution of the black man. But they are KKK supporters who are known for the murder and the execution of anybody who is not white. Why hasn't the members of the KKK been hunted down and dispersed? So then when kids come home and when black people are asked, yo, are you doing this because I'm black? White people get attitudes. No, you're going to pull the race card. There are hundreds of thousands of people who still support the KKK in our country. That is a valid question. Is it because I'm black? That is a valid question. And the president said there were good people on both sides. I'm talking about re-electing this man. That man told 4 congresswomen of color to go back to the country they came from. They came from America. And y'all talking about re-electing this man. I don't care, what good and great things Donald Trump has done. The rhetoric that comes from his mouth is unacceptable. I don't know, man. Who am I? What do I know? I'm just another black man who could be going for a jog, who could be gunned down in the street. I'm just another black man who could be walking home from getting a pack of Skittles and could be gunned down in the street. I'm just a black man who could be selling CDs outside of a gas station with the permission of the gas station owner and could be gunned down in the streets. God forbid I go check somebody's house out that's being built, because I could be gunned down in the street. Or I don't, hand over my license because you don't tell me why you're pulling me over, because I could be gunned down. Just do what the officer says. That's slavery, fam. Giving them a badge, and this badge is to do whatever I say, or nigga, I'll kill you. That's slavery. That's overseers. The overseers were the guys on the horses with the whips in the cotton fields. Those were the overseers. And they had badges. They weren't sheriff badges, but they had badges. Be like, yeah, look at me. I'm the one in charge. Do what I say or die. I don't know. I don't know what else could be said or done to get the message across. For the last few that are still holding out. Well, if he would have just done what they said. I live in a country that flies the flag, stripes and stars. What do those stripes and stars mean? They mean that the colonies were tired of paying taxes to a queen across the sea. Let's get the slaves to help us fight against them and gain our independence. The nation was then divided, after the genocide of the natives. Let's get the slaves to help us fight against the natives. Let's get the slaves to help us take Texas and California from Mexico. Well, they're no longer slaves. We don't want them to vote. We don't want them to own anything. And the KKK can, kill, lynch, drag them behind cars. They could do what they want. And then the face of the KKK changed and they went underground. And they became police officers, lawyers, judges, congressmen, Senate. And to this day, we still have the open execution of the black man on the street. y'all want to holler the stars and the stripes. Why won't you stand for the national anthem? Why you don't put your hand over your heart? Walk a mile in my shoes.